Oh, Canada, our home and native land, true patriot love in all thy sons command. Sorry, Canada. Bummer. It's a bummer for you. Welcome to the Normal America Show. Host Rob Knorr. We're going to talk a little about Canada tonight and some other things. It's ugh. It's a day, man. Here where I'm at, it's like we had like a hailstorm. Looked like we might get some tornadoes. Did you ever, when you're getting that like really hard rain and it's during the day and everything's just super gray and you're watching the trees bend in a direction that trees shouldn't bend. It's like, I think the worst is past me here. I was actually on the phone with a friend who lives further out east. Um, in Pennsylvania. And so the storm sort of passed through here. He probably lives an hour, a little more than an hour away from me. So I'm shooting the breeze with him for like 15, 20 minutes. And then he's like, "Did you guys get a bad storm?" I was like, "Yeah." He's like, "Yeah, I think we're starting to get it." Then, like mid sentence, he cut out. And so he's since messaged me on and said, "Yeah, my power's out." I was like, "Oh, that's a bummer." So I was kind of waiting around to stream until I saw whether or not we were going to continue with this brutal storm, but everything looks okay. The other thing is, do you all have, I don't know where you all live. I don't know if this is, I would assume this isn't universal to the United States. I'm not sure. And I would assume it's different in other countries, but we have like volunteer fire department and we have a fire whistle, but it also has a tornado whistle. So the fire whistle will be like, this is what you tuned in for, right? Right? Fire whistle impressions. But it's the same sound for a tornado whistle, except it never comes back down. So it'll just be like, so when you first hear it, you're like, ah, and then it came down. So it was a fire whistle and not the tornado whistle that was going off outside my house. So, which isn't good because that probably means there was a wreck. Someone probably wrecked in the storm. But yeah, you get used to hearing that tornado whistle. Now, I've never lived through a bad tornado hitting directly where I'm at. There's certainly been those that have hit within 25, 30 miles of where I've been at that were slightly damaging. The biggest damage that I've lived through natural disasters around here would be floods and blizzards, but never a really bad tornado. However, my brother-in-law graduated high school like the first year I started dating my wife, and he moved to Joplin, and there was this horrible tornado that went through Joplin. So we went out to visit him not long after, and it was crazy. Like I'd never seen that sort of destruction from a natural disaster like that. It was crazy. Corey Barton says, "Tornado alarm brought to you by Big Soda." Yes, Big Soda. They got their sugary fingers and everything now. So look at that. Finally, I found an impression. My Bernie impression sucks. That's what it should be instead of a fire whistle. It should be. "I'm once again asking all of you to go to your basement. Climate change has caused yet another tornado." Yeah, yeah, that should be my dono sound. What's up, Go Rams? So, yeah, work situation's weird right now, so I'm not really at liberty to talk about it, but I got an hour to a couple hours. Shane Ever, I know I got some fans. Crisco in here from Canada. I know some other folks from Canada. I actually feel bad. We're going to talk about Canada first today, and then we're going to talk about my old friend Pisco and the sort of debate I had with him the other day, impromptu on his spaces that he put up the debate and then put up a reaction to the debate. Getting that content, you got it, Pisco. I didn't watch all of Pisco's reaction to me commenting for a couple minutes about the debate, but that's okay. There's a part of it that I wanted to talk about just to give you an idea of sort of the way that he argues. So, but yeah, let's start off talking about Canada. I'm on notice. Oh shoot. Um, so there's a lot to say here. Was this Trump's fault? Does Canada deserve it? Um, So I guess I'll just sort of go stream of consciousness on this. I guess my overarching point is I definitely think Trump helped tilt the balance to Carney and sort of the left in this election. However, I don't know that Polivier, or however you pronounce it, would have won anyways. By the way, it's starting to become a theme with the show that I shouldn't be proud of, that I just can't pronounce. I mean, Trende Argawa, Pierre Polivier, whatever. Uh, English names, Smith, Bob, things like that. Crips, Bloods, those are gangs I could say. Uh, I think that both of those things could be true simultaneously. I think without a doubt, the biggest factor in what seemed to be Pierre's good chance to win, then his fortunes changing, was Trudeau dropping out. I think that that's clearly the biggest. I think so much of the disillusionment from Canadians was directed at Trudeau. And so certainly I think him dropping out allowed sort of people to say, well, was his party really the problem or was it him? Now, the catalyst after that of Trump with the tariffs and the 51st state talk certainly didn't help. And it probably stopped any chance of Pierre being able to sort of bounce back from Trudeau leaving, in my opinion. Uh, but there is a lot to say that if the polling we saw was legitimate and like Pierre and his party was like 20% up at the time that Trudeau dropped out, because that's how much the people of Canada were disillusioned with the policies of Trudeau's government. And if they're willing to basically forgive all of that and vote for the same party because Trump said mean things and mean jokes, yeah, there is some of like, okay, I guess you get the government you deserve then. But I hesitate to do that because all of us debate based on or vote based on feelings. We all do. Some less than others, but it's true. We all do. Uh, but I have a difficult time. I mean, we elected Joe Biden in 2020. We almost elected Hillary Clinton. We almost elected Kamala Harris. The news cycle goes a couple different ways. We could have President Kamala right now. So it's difficult for me to look at the people of Canada and go, oh, you've dug your own hole. They have. So have we. The United States has. Okay, we elected Trump. Who knows that he'll be good enough to dig us out of this hole? Probably not. I'm still pessimistic. But look at all the crappy Republicans that we still have in Congress. By the way, what have they done? What's the Republican Congress done in the first 100 days of Trump's term? Can anybody tell me? Oh, they just got back from vacation. Sweet. Massive spending bills. That's all I've seen that they've done. So far be it for me to act like, well, the United States, we're far more reasonable with who we elect. Not really. But there is a sort of like head scratching about like, okay, so the people of Canada are willing to overlook the 10 past disastrous years because they really hate Trump's big mouth. Okay. Nice. The truth is Canada's screwed because of demographic changes. So I think I was reading by 2040, 2045, 40% of Canada will be non-native born. I think right now it's like 25% or higher is either non-native born or their parents weren't born in Canada. In one generation, you've replaced 1/4 of the population. Oh, I have not, Courtney. I'll get to that. My wife wants me to talk about lawnmowers. Uh, there's no coming back. There's really not. When you import people that have different value system and don't have a connection to sort of the history of your country, they're going to massively change the priorities of your country. Now, it's not monolithic. That doesn't mean that no one that's an immigrant to Canada wouldn't vote for a more conservative party. But many of the people that are already there, that are native, are rabid lefties anyways. The United States really is the last holdout in the fight against globalism. And Joe Biden did a lot to try to wreck that, importing 12 million people. And now, of course, we see now that they're brought here, you can't send any of them back without spending trillions of dollars and giving them years to fight things in court and blah, 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 blah. So I don't know. They elected someone in Canada who talks about the highest priorities like climate change, their priorities importing more people. Crisco's really pissed. Trump did everything he could to make sure globalism won in Canada. What was he supposed to do? Hey, the one country I'm not mad at is Canada. Let me cuck to Canada. Let me do that. I'm really concerned that Pierre, who's basically just a Mitt Romney type globalist, I need to kiss his ass to cross the finish line. Sorry, Crisco, I love you, but if your country's that weak, Trump, mean guy Trump, he said mean things. Now my country said, yeah, Crisco, my country's president doesn't shut up because your feels. Sorry, man. Sorry. Maybe you guys should have got out there and did more. I have a difficult time accepting this. What was Pierre offering Trump? Can you tell me? What did Pierre offer the United States that the people of the United States should have elected someone that would have pushed for Pierre to get elected? Oh, just slightly less globalization. So maybe instead of it being completed in 30 years, it'd be 40. That's it. Maybe Trump wants Canada to be weak because he thinks it'll be easier to push them around to get more favorable deals. Maybe. I don't know. I'm concerned about my country and electing people in my country that will have the priorities of the citizens of my country. And I really don't care that Canada chose once more to elect a socialist globalist. I don't care. And if their excuse is going to be, oh, your president should have been quiet, I don't care. Now, do I think Pierre ran a good campaign? No. But do I think that Pierre should have came out and been like, well, we got Trump's back? No, he had to call out Trump. He did. Oh, you see how you met Andrew and Rachel yesterday? Cool. That's right. Pierre should have went full nationalist. Crisco, as a Canadian, would you rather have the leader of a different country be a leader that would bend over backwards to help Canada out, or one that would challenge Canada for better deals for their own population? See, because that's what we've had in the United States for a long time. That's what Obama was. That's what Biden was. The rest of the world liked Obama. They liked Biden because they could take advantage of the United States with Obama and Biden. Trump's fighting for the people of the United States. That's a bad deal for the people around the world. So maybe Trump's looking at it like that. I don't want a strong nationalist leader in Canada because we're not going to be able to get more favorable deals then. I understand being Canadian and being upset about Trump. I think without a doubt, Trump's at least partially, if not majoritarily, to blame for Pierre losing. I didn't get to see Andrew's debate yet. I was busy working. I get it. I totally get it. If things had gone differently and if 2020 a conservative had won in Canada, like a populist conservative, and they came out trashing Trump into the 2024 election, and that led to Kamala winning, I'd be furious at that Canadian prime minister. So I get it. I understand. If Kamala and Trump had another election right now, Kamala would win. I don't know if that's true. I could hold these two positions simultaneously in my head. I understand Canadians being, even conservative Canadians being furious at Trump. I get that. But also, I think it's a reflection on just how poor Canada is at this point. That by most objective metrics, Canada's under the 10 years leadership of Trudeau's party not been doing well, and they just reelected them. So Ian says, I don't understand the hate from California to US. All from Canada. Oh, yes, that makes more sense. I was like, what? I'm not so sure that the United States is in that much of a better position than Canada. If the Democrats win in 2028, they're just going to mass import migration again and issue all the same sorts of policies you're seeing in Canada. So before we go making fun of Canada, lest that be us. And it may very well be us. It may already be too late. There may be nothing Trump or anyone else could do. And let me defend Crisco a little here as well. How many people were furious that Zelensky didn't wear a suit to the White House? Now, I don't know that I commented on that. I didn't think it was that big of a deal. I thought that Zelensky disrespected Trump and Vance during that conversation. He called, instead of calling JD vice president, he called him JD. He was sort of correcting them during the whole thing. So I certainly made allusions to him disrespecting the United States. And I know certainly many people that watch my channel did. So don't tell me if a foreign leader didn't start saying, yeah, we're going to make the United States part of our territory. How about that? Don't tell me that most Trump supporters wouldn't be like, oh, what did you just say? Mother effer? You'd be livid. So I get it. I don't know that that would make me run out and vote for the socialist, Democrats. See you, Crisco. Good luck to you, man. By the way, so anything more that people wanted to talk about Canada? I just think because of the demographics, it's inevitable, anyways. You're going to keep importing people that aren't going to be high skilled labor, that are going to want more and more socialism, that aren't going to really care about the cultural values of what Canada has stood for. Now that that train's rolling and those people all have the right to vote and more will come in and they'll have the right to vote, I don't know how you dig yourself out of that hole through democracy. It's the old line in the sand line from Ben Franklin. Once in direct democracy, once people realize 51% realized they could vote for the other 49% stuff, it's the beginning of the end. So I put a post up the other day. Did you see, speaking of the Pope's funeral, Trump wore a blue suit. Did you see that? Oh my goodness, Trump wore a blue suit. Now I know, everyone here is going to say, yeah, but so did a bunch of other people. No one made a big deal about that. Yes, we know. But I made the comment, wow, I can't believe we're into Trump's second term, and the only scandal he's had was the color of his suit. What a great president. And you should have seen the people on X. What? That wasn't the only scandal? What are you talking about? There's other scandals. Man, are these people stupid. Now, in case anyone listening needs me to break it down for them, you remember all the scandals of Barack Obama, whether it be Benghazi, whether it be Fast and Furious, whether it be spying on Fox News reporter James Rosen and his father, targeting Trump in the 2016 election. But if you listen to these people, they say the only scandal Obama had in his term was a tan suit. Remember the tanned suit? That's how great Obama is. He had no scandals, just his tanned suit. Okay. Trump's blue suit, that's the only scandal. No. They don't even get their own stupidity. It's like no one's above the law. No one's above the law, they parroted. Like the NPCs that they are. Then a judge gets arrested and they go, oh my God, you can't arrest judges. They're above the law. So ridiculous. Just there was a scandal about the color of Obama's suit. Oh my God, Trump wore a blue suit. David from $5 says Canada will end up like the UK, where they bring in so many foreigners that they end up voting in their own foreign leaders. It's already happening. Many of the politicians, they don't look like Canadians, or at least how you used to imagine them. Look, let's have a tough conversation about this. No one said judges are above the law. No, well put, HN. No one said judges are above the law. Here's what the implication was. With Trump, despite the fact he was a president that was being arrested by the administration of his opponent, the argument was made that no one's above the law, implying that your station does not dictate whether or not you should be reasonably investigated, even by your opponent, for a crime. Now, many of those crimes, we could see the lawfare was ridiculous, the things they went after Trump for, unprecedented things, not just for presidents to go after, but anyone ever, like Letitia James the Bragg case in New York, where they created a novel legal theory that had been never used before to go after Trump. Or with the E. John Carroll case, they literally changed the law just to go after Trump to extend statute of limitations. And the mantra was, no one's above the law, which was just because he's powerful, well, we're allowed to go after him. Then when Trump's team comes in and says, we agree, they go, you can't do that. That's corrupt. Why? Are they above the law? No. When our side does it to our political opponents, it's for good reasons. But if they do it to us, well, then it's corruption. You see? If Trump pardons members of his family, that'll be corruption. When Biden pardons members of his family, that's not corruption. We didn't technically say that judges weren't above the law. We just said that anytime Trump's DOJ will arrest a judge, it will be corruption. It's different, baby. It's always different. They created the standard. Now the standard will be used against them. But shouldn't you be against it? Those days are done. It's the old cancel culture thing. I was against cancel culture. The left said, yay, gung-ho with cancel culture. Okay, I lost the argument. Then the right said, we're going to engage in cancel culture. And the left said, but I thought you were against cancel culture. We don't care what you think anymore. I've lost a little weight. Demographics, let's talk about it. I used to say this thing, and I still believe this predominantly, that 100 years after I'm dead, if I could look down and see what this country looks like, I would rather it be people that think like me and have the values that I have than people that look like me. Now, it may be that people that look like me would be more likely to share my values because if you look like me, that might be an indicator that you share geographic or racial consistency that makes it more likely to have those values. But nonetheless, the values, the diversity of thought, more important to me, or the, what you think, who you are inside, more important than who you are racially. I still believe that. And I also still believe we're all tribal and we all gravitate predominantly towards one tribe, though we're tribal in many ways. So, for example, I'm tribal when it comes to my family. I care about my family first and foremost. But when it comes to sort of a demographic type issue, I don't know if I'm using the word correctly there, but you'll see what I mean. I choose to think of rural people. That's the group I identify with and I advocate for. And that list includes rural people that are white, that are Hispanic, that are black, that are Christian, that are Jewish, that are Buddhist, that are straight, that are gay. I'm not really delineating based on that. John Rock, thanks for the $2. Says, okay, Griff time. We know Rob will not ask. We will. Thanks, John Rock. I appreciate it. I always appreciate the money. So now I have my preferences. Although I talk about issues that I think faces rural Americans first and foremost, I also talk about Christians. I talk about men and being tribal for them. And part of that is white people. It's just true. If you're out there and you think that sounds racist, you have every right to be tribal for whatever race you want. Black people, Hispanic people, Indian people. There's no shame or anything derogatory about that at all. At all. Everyone has the right to identify with groups and to want to advocate for the well-being of those groups. What does rural mean? Am I pronouncing that incorrectly because I'm a Yinzer? Rural, rural, as in not urban or suburban. So, in the spirit of talking about racial tribalism, I'm sick and tired of diversity meaning anti white. I'm tired of every country in the world that isn't white being allowed to have a country for their ethnicity, their race. But every country that has been historically white being told, no, you have to open up. I'm tired of it. There is a clear agenda and there is a clear movement in places like Canada, the UK, other European countries, and yes, in the United States to remake the demographics of these countries. That's what's happening. I don't have a problem with people of other races at all. I don't. I'm not saying that someone of another race shouldn't be allowed to immigrate into the United States or any of these other aforementioned countries. I'm not saying that at all. But when it becomes something to celebrate, yay, by year such and such, white people will be a minority in this country. Yay. You can't tell me there's not something wrong with that. And you can't tell me that white people don't have the right to say, wait a minute, why is everyone celebrating our replacement? And it's not just the race that matters, though it is true that in general, different races or people from different areas of the world have different cultures and have different values. And it's okay to think my values and my culture for my group are the ones that I prefer, which they are. Again, part of that is the biological ancestry I have as a white person. Most of it for me is the geographic history that I have as someone who lives in rural America. But when you seek to replace that, take skin color out of it. If you took where I live, and let's say in my county, I don't know how many people live in my county, but let's say there's 30,000 people that live here, and all of a sudden in the next 5 years, you import 500,000 people, and they're all white, but they're all from, you know, upper like Martha's Vineyard type area. You don't think that's going to massively change the culture in my county? You don't think that's going to change the politics? And as they tell you you're a racist for noticing this stuff and that it's not happening, eventually they'll say, yeah, it's happening and it's a good thing. That's okay. It's good. The first generation immigrants that are coming into Canada aren't going to vote like the people that have lived in Canada going back generations. They're not going to. They're not going to have the same values. That doesn't mean that they'll be terrible, bad people. I'm not saying that. But it's not the same. And it's okay to want to protect the values and the culture that you have lived with. And it's arrogant to think you should snap their fingers and change it. If I move to Zimbabwe, should I say, hey, everybody has to change now to my cultural preferences? And I'm tired of the, oh, you're racist. Oh, source, please. Everybody sees it occurring. They brag about it. How many times in the United States have they said, that's not occurring? There's no replacement. There's no one suggesting these illegals should be allowed to vote. Then on the campaign trail, Chuck Schumer's like, the goal is to give them all a pathway to citizenship. Really? Even if they don't vote, they're still counted in the census. Wonder Dog says, is it normal to block people in your chat because they catch you making hyperbolic statements and they prove you wrong? I don't know if that's normal. Good question. So, whatever. We'll see the direction that Canada goes. But it's not looking good. So, all right. So I don't have the longest amount of time. I figure we go about an hour today, so we got about 20 minutes up. So I did call in to Pisco's space the other day. He asked me to call in and hash out sort of this modern day debate business. This was Friday because hilariously, after I got screwed over by modern day debates and they replaced me with Alex Stein and didn't tell me that I got replaced on Wednesday, they left me hanging until I saw on Pisco's public post that he was debating modern day debate or on modern day debate against Alex Stein when I was supposed to be debating him. Hilariously, Alex then backed out and they wanted to know if I would do the debate with Pisco and modern day debate. No, thank you. But Pisco wanted me to call into his space and talk about that, bury the hatchet on that. I have no problems with Pisco about this, by the way. Just to rehash real quick, I'll rib him. I'll be like, yeah, you ran for me. You wanted to debate Alex, but it's not like that. Alex is an easier debate for him. Alex has a bigger audience. Modern day debate would rather have Alex because he has a bigger audience. No shame in that. Take the debate with the bigger audience. That would be easier. I don't have a problem with that. Right? But I'll still make fun of him. That's fine. But he wanted to call. And then, of course, as it always is with me and Pisco, what was supposed to be a 5-minute, 10-minute conversation ended up being like 2 hours. We were talking about Garcia. I basically brought up my point that, you know, with all of these things, people like Pisco and these Democrats, they don't care about rule of law. They don't care about due process. They don't care about being forthright with the American people. They wanted millions of people to come in this country. They wanted these millions of illegals. They pretended they didn't during election season. They were lying. And now that they're here, they say, we're going to make your life hell and use the legal process to make sure that it takes years and years and years before you can undo the damage that we caused in 4 years. And oh, by the way, we'll lie again. If we're running again, we'll say, no, we're for a secure border. Then we'll open it up again, knowing that there's nothing you could do because we'll inundate you with activist judges and claims. And the fact that Pisco only thought that it was, quote, regrettable that the FBI was doing things like illegally spying on Trump's team, the president of the United States, the FBI spying on them, and all the other corruption and lawfare we saw against Trump, while the same FBI protected his opponents. And what he said about it was regrettable. That's it. It was regrettable. That's what I'll say. Anytime you bring up a case like Garcia, the Trump administration missed this withholding order. It's regrettable. Next. Oh, it's different though. Now it's super serious. Now this is serious. That's basically the thrust of what's going on. But we talked through the Garcia case and some other cases and stuff like that. I didn't think there was anything special. The worst part of it is because I was on my phone. I wasn't in front of a computer. And because of that, I can't use my computer mic, which means I sound like I have a lisp because for some reason with my iPhone, when I call into a spaces, it sounds like this the whole time, which is annoying. But one of the things Pisco does is you have to understand he's a lawyer and I'm not, right? And one of the things he does a lot is he'll hide behind this veil of sort of legalese in order to give like the impression that his argument is somehow better. But oftentimes it's simple word tricks that he's employing. So I'll give you one example. When I talked about the withholding order, and I was like, well, he had sort of, I'm going to screw up the terminology again. I was like, he basically had an order to be deported. And then later a judge said, but you can't deport him to the countries from El Salvador because he's under threat there. But he still had a deportation order, just not to El Salvador. And I said, would you recommend deporting him somewhere else? No. And of course, that's going to be, and you could watch this debate to see it. Now, Pisco says, even if you could prove that Garcia, if you bring him back, you have the trial, and you're like, actually, Barrio 18, the gang you're afraid of, doesn't even exist anymore. So now we can send you back. Pisco says, no, because now he has a second claim because Trump has politicized it. So now he has reason to fear going back to El Salvador because he'll be treated like crap by Bukele because Trump has politicized it. So we can't send him to El Salvador. I say, can you send him to another country? No, you can't send him to another country either. You see, that's the game. That's the game. Right? When he makes this argument, he goes, well, actually, no, he doesn't have a deportation order. He doesn't. And I'm like, yeah, he does. Just this with no, that's not the way it works. The deportation orders are only specific to one country. And I'm like, I'm pretty sure that's not how it works. And then I guess later, as we start to parse through it, what he's talking about is technically the specific deportation order that says send this dude to El Salvador is rescinded, but he still has, I think it's called a removal order. So the next step from a removal order is when you get pen to paper and say, okay, he's going to Guatemala. So Pisco's sort of playing this some legalese semantic game that's like, well, when he knew that the general point that I'm making is courts already said that he should be removed from this country. Now, a better example of that, though, is going to be the issue that I wanted to talk about right here. I brought up the point. So one of the things, because we have Boasberg, who, by the way, Pisco tried to slimily pretend he didn't know Boasberg was the judge that left Kevin Kleinsmith off with a slap on the wrist. Oh, I don't know who that judge was. I was like, yeah, it was Boasberg. Oh, okay. Anyways, The fact that Boasberg ordered the planes returned immediately while they're in the air and they didn't return, and now there's a contempt order about it. And he's going to make this huge deal. Oh my God, this is unlawful. Now, of course, I said, we'll have to see what the Supreme Court says. I think that I'm closer to what the Supreme Court's going to say. Just like when Pisco was certain that, Trump should be kept off the ballot, the courts rolled in a 9-0 that he was wrong. And he'll say, well, I predicted they would. Yeah, maybe that's a good sense that you're wrong. So we'll see. But the argument that Trump's blatantly engaged in illegal behaviors, we'll see. We'll see what the Supreme Court says, I guess. But one of the arguments I said was, look, it was clear that Trump's administration, the DOJ, thought that Boasberg lacked jurisdiction, which the court upheld. He didn't have jurisdiction. And Pisco says, that's not true. They had jurisdiction. And I said, no, they had to file their habeas in Texas where they were confined. No, that's not true. They had jurisdiction. They had subject matter jurisdiction. What you're talking about is venue. That's different. That's not jurisdiction. Now, I should have just been like, whatever, this is semantic bullshit. Then improper venue, same thing. Even if there's technically a difference between the word jurisdiction and venue, he knows what the court said. What he's trying to mislead his audience about was the court did say, yes, this was not the correct place for these hearings to occur. This judge was not the correct judge to hear this because it was the improper venue. How does Rob rationalize Eric Adams, the architect of migrant camps, getting off scot-free? It's regrettable. Next. Now, I wasn't sitting in front of a computer, and we had this whole discussion on what jurisdiction means. Because to me, jurisdiction is just sort of, I understand words might mean something specifically in a legal context, and I understand Pisco and company will go, it's the legal context that matters. But it's clear that what I'm saying is the Supreme Court said this wasn't the right judge to hear this. So when he's saying turn the planes around and the Trump team knows, no, you're not the right judge to make this claim. And then the Supreme Court later says, yes, they're correct. You were not the right judge to make this claim. But that's not technically jurisdiction. That's venue. So let's go to the tape, shall we? Now, I hope I have the times right on this because I didn't put a lot of time into looking this up, if I'm honest. Here we go. Let's see if this is it.
Jurisdiction as Boasberg laid out in his opinion.
That's a lengthy explanation.
It's a correct one.
You could say that, but here's the question I'll ask you, right? What does the term Kleinsmith thing and now through a pattern of claiming jurisdiction when he blatantly didn't have it when it came?
So he absolutely had subject matter jurisdiction. He didn't have venue. He had jurisdiction. And the courts have confirmed, by the way, that these...
Notice what he does there, first off. When I say Boasberg, I'm like, yeah, gave Kleinsmith off with a slap on the wrist. And he blatantly didn't have jurisdiction here. He goes, listen to what he says.
Kleinsmith thing and now through a pattern of claiming jurisdiction when he blatantly didn't have it when it came.
So he absolutely had subject matter jurisdiction. He didn't have venue. He had jurisdiction. And
he absolutely had subject matter jurisdiction. He didn't have venue. He had jurisdiction. So notice that he uses three terms there. When I say he didn't have jurisdiction, he says, no, he absolutely did. And then he doesn't say have jurisdiction. He says had subject matter jurisdiction. Then he says he didn't have venue. And then he says, but he did have jurisdiction. Notice how he's interchanging that? Let's keep going.
And the courts have confirmed, by the way, that the Supreme Court has confirmed, for example, in the Kilmar-Garcia case, that the courts have jurisdiction over that case. And so it just isn't the case. I mean, they've lost in the jurisdictional cases.
Explain me the difference.
He says the courts have jurisdiction. I didn't say the courts didn't have jurisdiction. I said Boasberg didn't.
Between venue and jurisdiction.
Yeah, sure. Jurisdiction relates to whether or not the court itself is empowered to hear those kinds of claims, right? So that's subject matter jurisdiction is different than like statutory venue, which is basically in which of the...
So he says jurisdiction is, does the court have the right to hear those claims? Right, but there could be different types of jurisdiction. Notice how he then switches right into subject matter jurisdiction. Yes, a specific type of jurisdiction, but he's interchanging those. And he's trying to do this to make it seem... Now, keep in mind, his point is irrelevant. My point still stands. The court said this wasn't the right judge to hear the case. I'm using the term he didn't have jurisdiction. He wants to make a semantic point so that his audience can go, oh, you're correct. He had subject matter jurisdiction in just improper venue, which is sort of a worthless point anyways. But if he's going to be smug about it as a lawyer, fine, let's look into it then. So I'm like, okay, because it's my belief at this point in the conversation, dude, you're just being semantical. Then what's the difference between venue and jurisdiction? Right? Because to me, if it's in an improper, if a judge is in the improper venue, then that judge does not have the jurisdiction to hear my case.
Many of this type of court, you have to bring it. So in the context, for example, of civil litigation, there's the venue statute, which says, even though other courts might have subject matter jurisdiction. So, for example, federal courts generally have subject matter jurisdiction over cases that rise in diversity jurisdiction, or that raise federal issues. Notwithstanding the fact that the federal courts have subject matter jurisdiction in those areas, the statute on venue tells you that there's a preference order for where you're supposed to bring those cases. And for habeas matters, the venue statute specifies that it's in the place of incarceration. And then there's an additional holding from the Supreme Court, which is that any case involving the determination of an Alien Enemies Act can't be brought under the Administrative Procedures Act, has to be brought under the habeas petitions, and therefore the venue was improper. But that doesn't relate to subject matter jurisdiction, as Boasberg laid out in his opinion.
Now, again, so what he does there is he has this ability to say a lot of words to fluff out what he's saying. If I could translate to what he said there is, he's talking about, well, diversity, jurisdiction, whatever. But when he gets specifically to this case, this is what he's saying. He's saying, look, the court did rule that, there's a separate ruling that they'd have to challenge this through habeas, and that has to be in the area of confinement. And the court ruled that because the area of confinement wasn't in Boasberg's district, that it was the improper venue. But then notice how he goes, but he did have subject matter jurisdiction. So again, when I didn't say the court ruled that he didn't have subject matter jurisdiction, I said the court ruled he didn't have jurisdiction. Pisco keeps adding the specific type of jurisdiction. Yes, those courts could have subject matter jurisdiction, but they didn't have the jurisdiction of the venue. So it was, again, he says a lot of words that just says, well, they had subject matter jurisdiction. And the reason he's doing this is because he doesn't want to admit, you're right, that's what the court says. He wants to say, but the court did say that they could hear cases like this. Yeah, no one said they couldn't. I didn't. Let's keep it going.
That's a lengthy explanation.
It's a correct one.
You could say that, but here's the question I'll ask you, right? What does the term jurisdiction mean?
It's different contexts. So there's personal jurisdiction, there's subject matter jurisdiction.
I understand there's different kinds. What does the word jurisdiction mean?
It usually implies at a broad level some kind of power over a thing. That's at a broad level, but getting more narrow.
So let's say that the question I'm going to have for you when you say subject jurisdiction and things like that, there's no such thing as venue jurisdiction?
No, it's just venue. It's subject matter jurisdiction is separate from venue.
Venue would have to do, I think, with personal jurisdiction, but regardless, we'll continue.
I would think that that's not true. I could be wrong. I bet if I look this up that there is a term venue jurisdiction. And in other words, jurisdiction is basically saying when the court is empowered to have power over and hear.
Yeah, it has to do with the inherent power of this court to do a thing, as opposed to which court.
The things that we would say that the court doesn't have jurisdiction is because the specific topic at hand, right? The subject. Correct.
Usually the subject matter of the suit, right? Hence the term subject matter jurisdiction.
There could be other types of jurisdiction, such as the venue.
Are
they in the right location to hear?
That's it. Are they in the right location, but not whether the court system itself has the power to hear it in general, right?
So I just said select the venue or in the right location. He says no. Yes, that's it. Whether they're in the right location, but so he's differentiating subject matter jurisdiction. Does the court have the right to hear cases on this particular type of subject? But then there's also venue, which he's already admitted that they have improper venue. To me, I'm using the term venue as they didn't have jurisdiction because it was the wrong venue. He's saying, no, you can't use the word jurisdiction. They absolutely had jurisdiction because they had subject jurisdiction. I'm saying, yes, but they didn't have jurisdiction because it was the improper venue. He's saying that, no, you can't use jurisdiction like that.
That's what subject matter jurisdiction refers to.
A court can have the power. For example,
because venues.
If I have a small claim here in Pennsylvania, right? California Small Claims Court doesn't have the power to hear that case. Although you may say, well, they absolutely have the jurisdiction to hear small claims.
They might not. Yeah, no. So certain state courts, most state courts probably lack subject matter jurisdiction over those petty offenses in other states. And and there would
But
also
that's
be a venue problem,
but
and by the way, another
but
term,
that's
personal
right,
jurisdiction
but
matter.
that's
So there's
venue jurisdiction.
no. Why are you
Yes,
trying to fucking teach me, dude? You just got blown the fuck out. Subject matter jurisdiction and
What the
venue
fuck
are
are you talking
subject
about?
matter jurisdiction and venue
Okay,
are
so
not the
it's-
same thing. Stop just fucking winging it, you idiot.
See? Now he keeps saying subject matter jurisdiction and venue are not the same thing. Where have I ever said that? Where did I say Boasberg didn't have subject matter jurisdiction? The entire time I'm just using the general term jurisdiction. And then when I'm like, there's jurisdiction, you have jurisdiction because you're the proper venue. He says, no, that's different than subject matter jurisdiction. Right. I'm not saying that's not different than subject matter jurisdiction. I'm saying you could lack jurisdiction because you're in the improper venue. That doesn't mean you lack subject matter jurisdiction, but he keeps conflating those terms. And he's saying that I got blown out.
Idiot.
Okay, then we'll do this real slow. Explain to me why a California small claims court doesn't have subject matter jurisdiction over my small claim in Pennsylvania. Give me the reasons why they don't.
Yeah, because the enabling acts or enabling statutes of the courts in California, listen, I don't know how they're specifically set up. Those specific court might have subject matter jurisdiction. Yes. So what's that?
Because they don't have jurisdiction because their jurisdiction is limited by their own laws to these sorts of contract claims that occur.
Well, hang on a second. So
in the state of California.
So just to be clear, the Pennsylvania courts might have the California courts might give their courts subject matter jurisdiction to hear those cases, but it might be illegal to bring them in those cases because there's no personal jurisdiction over the defendant in that case. In contact or even the people themselves consent to jurisdiction in the case of personal jurisdiction in some other place. But again, that's all to say it's not getting at the heart, which is venue and subject matter jurisdiction are different concepts. Any lawyer,
again, he keeps saying this. I never said subject matter jurisdiction was the same as venue. My initial statement was Boasberg didn't have the jurisdiction. The court said that it was the improper place. He says no. And he keeps interchanging the term subject matter jurisdiction. He's acting like I said, the court said Boasberg doesn't have subject matter jurisdiction.
Lawyer worth their salt will tell you that.
I understand that. No, and it's a nice straw man you're arguing against. Can you show me one time here where I've said that subject matter jurisdiction and venue aren't two separate things?
I think you're suggesting that there's such thing as venue jurisdiction.
No. Can you show me saying that? Can you show me what?
Yeah, you said that you said it was venue jurisdiction.
So notice I asked him, can you show me where you repeatedly keep saying everyone would tell you that subject matter jurisdiction and venue are two different things. Everyone would tell you that. And I'm like, can you show me once where I claimed otherwise? And he's like, well, yeah, you're saying there's venue jurisdiction. Right. I did say that you could lack jurisdiction because of venue. I did say that. Right. That's not what you're claiming, I said, though. Oops. Oh, I hate when this happens. Oh, boy. Give me a second. I have a faux pas here. Well, whatever. Here, we'll keep going.
Right. So when I say jurisdiction, I'm saying that court, that Boasberg did not have the authority to hear that because it was the improper venue. I used the term jurisdiction. You're like, no. He did have the right to hear the subject matter, just not the venue. You want to semantically say that?
No, it's not semantic, Rob. Let me explain why it's not semantic. It's not semantic because the argument that the Trumples want to put is no court can order U.S. officials doing things on foreign soils, which isn't what the Supreme Court held. That's what you want to bag, and you can tell by your geographical argument. What you want to imply to the audience and the people listening is the issue of jurisdiction or venue relates to the authority of courts in general to give orders to U.S. principals abroad. That's what you're trying to imply. And what I'm trying to say is, no, that's not it. The courts generally do have, the Supreme Court held, authority to issue orders that affect the conduct of U.S. principals abroad. And that's what I'm trying to get at, is why
I didn't make that argument.
That's what you're implying.
What was obvious from the get-go was that everyone who remotely paid attention knew that Boasberg was not in the proper location to hear this case.
That is not that is not true, Rob. Come on, give me a break. So that's not. So first of all,
so notice then when pressed finally at the end, what he says is, Oh, well, I knew what you meant. I knew what you meant. When you were talking about geography, you were then going to make this argument, and no court has the right to challenge Trump. Now, not only should he know that that's not, and by the way, this comes up later in the debate. He keeps telling his audience over and over. In fact, his title of this debate is, I get Rob to concede on 5 different issues. I talked to Pisco like a month ago, and I was like, here's problems I have with Trump using the Alien Enemy Act. Here's problems I have with sort of him going after these people like Khalil. Then he keeps telling his audience, Rob won't criticize any of this. And I'm like, that's not true. I literally talked to you a month ago where I criticized all this without you having to debate me on it. And then he puts a video up, Rob concedes. What are you talking about? So if he heard me previously say, this is what I said about the Alien Enemy Act stuff in general, which he would reasonably able to apply here, which was, I think that what's likely to happen is the Supreme Court's going to say that there is some form of due process that should be offered people that are charged under the Alien Enemy Act. There's like the idea of the level of due process of you're an illegal, we're sending you back to your country of origin is a less standard than you are a terrorist or an alien enemy, and therefore we're sending you to a country you've never been to go to prison. You should have the right to hear that charge against you and offer some sort of defense. Now, Pisco heard me say this. So when he says, oh, Rob, when I hear you talking about venue, I know that you're going to say that the courts said that Trump doesn't have, no courts can weigh in on Trump whatsoever and blah, blah, blah. That's not what I'm going to say at all. But I see this guy in the chat, right? Oh, Pisco's blowing Rob out in this. He doesn't know what he's talking about. So it comes down to, by the way, real quick, thank you so much, David. $5 says they don't have venue because it's out of their jurisdiction. Bad faith Pisco. Right, that's what I'm saying. But I don't know what I'm talking about. Now, Pisco's a lawyer. He seems to know this terminology very good. I didn't have access to a computer. I'm making the argument I think is very sound. I'm using the term jurisdiction. Do they have the authority to hear this case and make judgments? They do not, because it's the improper venue. Therefore, they didn't have jurisdiction. Pisco keeps conflating. But they did have subject matter jurisdiction. Right, but they didn't have jurisdiction because it was the improper venue. But that's different than subject matter jurisdiction. Right, I agree. So Pisco's trying to claim, nope, venue isn't a matter of jurisdiction. That's not how people talk. So clearly I'm getting blown out by the lawyer, right? I don't think that was the case, but that's what all the Piscopers will say, right? Here's the actual order. Supreme Court of the United States, Donald Trump, on the application to vacate the orders issued by the United States District Court for the District of Columbia, per curiam. This matter concerns the detention and removal of Venezuelan nationals believed to be members of Tribalism, an entity in the State Department is designated a foreign terrorist organization. The president issued Proclamation 10903 invoking the Alien Enemies Act, River Statute 4067, 50 USC 21, to detain and remove Venezuelan nationals who are members of TDA. Invocation of the Alien Enemy Act regarding the invasion of the United States by Tribalism, 90 Fed Regulation 13034. 5 detainees in a putative class sought injunctive and declaratory relief against the implementation of their removal order and proclamation. Initially, the detainees sought relief and habeas among other causes of action, but they dismissed their habeas claims. On March 15, 2025, the District Court for the District of Columbia issued 2 separate restraining orders, TROs, preventing any removal of named plaintiffs and preventing removal under the AEA and of a provisionally certified class consisting of all non-citizens in U.S. custody who are subject to the proclamation. Minute order on motion to certify class, blah, blah, blah. On March 28th, the District Court extended the TROs for up to 14 days. The D.C. Circuit denied the government's emergency motion to stay the order. The government then applied to this court, seeking vacatur of the orders. We construe that these TROs as appealable injunction. See Carson v. American Brands. We grant the application and vacate the temporary restraining order. Okay, so they're saying we are vacating the temporary restraining order. So Trump's DOJ wins this application. The detainees seek equitable relief against the implementation of the proclamation against the removal under the AEA. They challenge the government's interpretation of the act and assert that they do not fall within the category of removable alien enemies. But we do not reach those arguments, so we're not even getting to that point. Challenges to removal under the AEA, a statute which largely, quote, precludes judicial review, according to Luddick v. Watkins, must be brought in habeas, according to Hekelia v. Barber, holding that habeas was the only cause of action available to challenge deportation under immigration statutes that precluded judicial intervention beyond what was necessary to vindicate due process rights, regardless of whether the detainees formally request release from confinement because of their claims for relief, quote, necessarily imply the invalidity of their confinement and removal under the AEA. Their claims fall within the core of the writ of habeas corpus and therefore must be brought in habeas. So it's saying, regardless of their argument, that there are other arguments, we think that the core of this are habeas claims, and therefore they must file a writ of habeas. That's their defense against this. And then it cites the case. And immediate physical release is not the only remedy under the federal writ of habeas. That's from Peyton v. Rowe. See Nance 597 at 167, explaining that a capital prisoner may seek to overturn his death sentence and habeas by analogy to seeking release. Now, here's the important part. In R.E. Bonner, 151 U.S. 242, blah, 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 for core habeas petitions, quote, jurisdiction lies only in one district, the district of confinement. Let me repeat that. Jurisdiction lies only in one district, the district of confinement. Let me repeat that. Jurisdiction, oops, there I lost it, lies in only one district, the district of confinement. Now, John Billy's claiming I'm skipping something. I've skipped nothing. I started reading from the beginning of this. John Billy, would you like to explain to me how that doesn't use the term jurisdiction? Would you like to? Because it sounds to me like what I just read is the only jurisdiction for a court to hear this is the courts in the area of confinement. In other words, because this was an improper venue, the court did not have jurisdiction. But wait a minute. Pisco said, no, the courts didn't say that. They didn't say they didn't have jurisdiction. They just said venue. Literally, from the decision. For habeas petitions, jurisdiction lies in only one district, the district of confinement. The detainees are confined in Texas, so venue is improper in the District of Columbia. As a result, the government is likely to succeed on the merits of this action. In other words, because the venue is improper, jurisdiction is not granted. It's only in one district, the district of confinement. It's not that venue is different than jurisdiction, you imbecile. It's saying the courts did not have jurisdiction. What does this sentence mean? Jurisdiction lies only in one district, the district of confinement. So if it's not the district of confinement, do they have jurisdiction? John Billy, simple question. If jurisdiction only lies in the area of confinement, if it's a court not in the area of confinement, do they have jurisdiction? Yes or no? It's a simple question. Venue is the reason that they don't have jurisdiction. It's weird. I don't see him answering. That's strange. Why not? He just says, exactly. There you have it, folks. No one said jurisdiction equals venue. I said he didn't have jurisdiction because it was the improper venue. I was right. I never, show me once me saying jurisdiction equals venue. Show me that. Show me timestamp where I said jurisdiction equals venue. Did anybody else hear me utter the words jurisdiction equals venue? I said there is such a thing as venue jurisdiction. In other words, you cannot have the proper jurisdiction because you're in the improper venue. My argument from the get-go was the judges said, the Supreme Court said that this court, Boasberg, didn't have jurisdiction. Pisco said, no. He said improper venue. I said, right. But because the improper venue, that meant they didn't have jurisdiction. The court says, for habeas petition, jurisdiction lies only in one district, the district of confinement. Now, will you acknowledge, yes or no? Let's see if John Billy, let's see, would you acknowledge then, because this wasn't the district of confinement, that Boasberg didn't have jurisdiction? If jurisdiction only lies in the area of confinement, will you acknowledge, yes, that means that their court is saying Boasberg did not have jurisdiction? Can you do that? Not making any sense, yelling too much. Does anyone else think that they can't understand what I'm saying? Do I need to talk slower for you? For core habeas petitions, jurisdiction lies only in one district, the district of confinement. If Boasberg wasn't in the district of confinement, did he have jurisdiction? Yes, reading it over and over is making me right. Why can't you answer the question? Why can't you answer it? By the way, John Billy, when did I log in and remove your comments? All right. See ya. Pisco was wrong. The little Pisco defender there is wrong as well. The court specifically ruled that they didn't have jurisdiction. So Pisco's whole cope to his audience, oh, Rob said that they didn't say jurisdiction, and everyone worth their salt knows that there's a difference between subject matter jurisdiction and venue. I was correct when I said the court said he didn't have jurisdiction. All of that ranting and raving, oh, I know the law, and he's wrong. He's intentionally misleading. And this is the sort of stuff Pisco does all over the place. You go back, you can watch that whole Spaces interaction. Another thing he does when he's like, how do you know that the reforms at the FBI after the FISA abuses didn't change things? And I was like, well, the Durham report, for example, said something along the effects of, it didn't matter what policies changed. The culture at the FBI was a problem. Changing these policies because the culture was rotten. It's not a matter of changing policies. And Pisco says something to this effect. Well, yes, it's true that Durham said that if a culture was so wrong that just a change in policies wouldn't work and blah, 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 blah. Yeah, but Pisco, that's true. He does say that, but you're leaving out that. Notice the Weasley. I say, he said that the culture was bad and so changing policies wouldn't lead to significant change. And Pisco says, yes, he says that if a culture was bad, changing policies might not be all that's necessary. You notice the difference between those two statements? Notice that? What he's leaving out is, right, he said if the culture was bad, and it was bad. But you leave that out. So imagine being a little legal Andy arguing semantics of terms like jurisdiction. I'm a lawyer. You're getting blown out. You don't tell me about the law. I know. And then being wrong. Just being absolutely wrong. And I know what Pisco's going to say. Well, the term venue jurisdiction, people don't really use that term. It is clear what I said from the get-go was the court said he didn't have jurisdiction. It was the wrong location. And what I'm saying is there is jurisdictional concerns based on venue. That still falls within the category of whether or not you have jurisdiction. And Pisco's arguing semantically, no, that's venue, not jurisdiction. Right, but if you have improper venue, then you don't have jurisdiction. And after all the arguing, supposedly, Pisco read this. He didn't know that it says jurisdiction lies only in one district, the district of confinement. Odd. How did he miss that? That's what it's like to debate him constantly. It can't just be a simple, yeah. Or, well, technically that term's a little off, but I get what you're saying. Right. Nick says venue does equal jurisdiction. In other words, what you're saying is it's one of the criteria required to establish jurisdiction. All criteria, along with subject matter and personal jurisdiction, must be met. Correct. Venue is part of that. So yes, it's not venue and jurisdiction are synonymous. There are certain things that must be met before you establish that the judge has jurisdiction to hear a case. One of those is venue. One of those is subject matter. One of those is personal. Arguably, venue goes in with personal jurisdiction. But Pisco's not, so he has the chance to actually argue the merits of the case, but instead we have to argue 15 minutes about, oh, you said that the court said that he didn't have jurisdiction, but that's not true. It said he didn't have venue, which is one of the components necessary. Therefore, he didn't have jurisdiction. And if I would have been at my computer, I would have been able to bring up the case and would have read that. And I'm sure he would have said, yeah, what I'm saying is that still, yeah, you fucking idiot. Venue is different than personal jurisdiction. And it's different than subject matter jurisdiction. It's different. Everyone wants to solve and say, blah, 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 blah. That's what he would do. The only thing that they could say right now that definitively has been an order ignored by the court by Trump was bringing the planes back in the middle of the air, which is laughable. And they violated due process because they didn't honor the withholding order from El Salvador from Garcia, which the Trump administration admitted, our bad. Yeah, we screwed up. Everything else, the Supreme Court hasn't weighed in. Other courts have said, we'll see what the Supreme Court says. If the Supreme Court goes the other way, then what's the big illegalities that Trump's team's done? I even later talking at a funny voice is an indication that you're losing. Yes, that's exactly what I'm saying. That's sort of what Pisco does when he knows he's losing. So I look forward to one of Pisco's fans sending this clip to Pisco and then Pisco doing a big hour video on, well, wait, let me explain the difference between subject. I know what Rob was really thinking. He was really thinking subject matter jurisdiction. The point is, we'll see what the courts say about this stuff. But I don't take it seriously from people like Pisco that had no problem with the mistreatment of the Trump administration constantly. And that's without even getting into mistreatment of January 6 people, parents at school board meetings that were targeted by the FBI, and other groups. Yeah, all Pisco had to say to this argument was, yeah, okay, the court said he didn't have jurisdiction, and that doesn't mean he can't be in contempt, that the DOJ couldn't be in contempt. But no, he had to make this smug, oh, well. And that's because to him, it's all about this arrogance and presentation. I'm a lawyer. I know. Just so the audience could see how stupid you are. And then he's misleading. All right. It was a fun stream this evening. I'm going to go downstairs and enjoy my evening. Should be streaming tomorrow. I should be technically off work, so I'll have more time to stream. We'll try to set up some debates. Yeah, it's a delay tactic as well. But it's fun. Thank you to everyone who donated tonight. Oh, one thing I was going to say is I have saved up enough money. My wife has given me the go-ahead to buy a lawnmower. Yes. So I think this week, Friday or Saturday, I'm probably going to go lawnmower shopping. I'm thinking of getting a zero turn. I don't know the brand. I might go with Cub Cadet, but I'm probably going to buy from one of the local places around here because they also service them. And so if I have any problems with it, instead of having to take it to a shop I'm unfamiliar with, I could go straight to the place I purchased it from, like 10 minutes away. So I know locally they have a Bobcat shop and they have John Deere. DGG Wars tomorrow at 8 a.m. I don't think so. But if you've been missing it, Black Elk is absolutely crushing it. My editor, Black Elk, first off, if any of you are starting a show and you could pay Black Elk huge amounts of money, take him away from me. That dude deserves to get paid a ton of money. He is absolutely crushing it. The videos he's put out the past couple days are just phenomenal. His editing is amazing. Really, really, really just, I can't say enough about Black Elk. I need to get in contact with him. I'll probably be calling him tomorrow evening, and we'll set up some of this sort of debate review stuff that we're talking about. But it was a fun show tonight. To my Canadian brothers, I'm sorry. Look, no matter how bad things get, you have your family, you have your loved ones. That's the most important things. What's up, Project VO? How you doing, man? Yeah, we do need to set up a tip jar for Black Elk. We're gonna do, you know what we'll do? We'll do this week we'll do all donations straight to Black Elk stream. The Black Elk special. We'll do some point this week or next week. So but fun show tonight. I hope you all enjoyed it. We'll talk to you all soon. Probably see you tomorrow evening. As always, have a good one.